Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Energy and Natural Resources. I trust everyone made it here safely, hopefully. I know the roads are a little icy. Thank you. We will, I guess you're ready to go, Senator Waters? All right, we'll open the hearing then on Senate Bill 549 and introduce the prime sponsor, Senator Waters.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am Senator David Waters, District 4, here today for Senator D'Alessandro, who's the prime sponsor on Senate Bill 49. And I get to say it just this once. I'm going to introduce this damn bill, okay?
That is relevant.
The New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services is responsible for the reconstruction and rehabilitation of the 273 state-owned dams and for the operation of 208 of them. This includes dams on the state's largest lakes, Winnipesaukee, Winnisquam, Squam, Newfound, Sunapee, Ossipee. Currently, NHDS is in the process of evaluating the system-wide needs of New Hampshire state-owned dams and categorizing these dams by their purpose and needs. This evaluation process, DES has found that increasing capital needs and operational costs are outpacing current financial resources. And to ensure the DES can continue providing the same level of service to all the stakeholders that rely on state-owned dams and bodies of waters created by those dams, DES needs to evaluate other revenue sources. And let me just say that I think we all know from incidents in the past how important it is that we do have dam inspections and understand the increasing financial needs around keeping those safe for operation. Historically, DES Dam Bureau is primarily funded by revenue generated from leasing state-owned hydropower dams. However, these revenue streams have decreased as a result of numerous factors outside of DES control, meaning the legislature. The proposed legislation provides a mechanism to evaluate the current funding sources for the Dam Bureau and the possibility of other funding sources to keep the Dam Bureau financially viable. Additionally, the legislation clarifies the types of funds that the Dam Bureau can accept as a result of managing dams throughout the state, such as the revenue generated resulting from the sale of a dam. Finally, the legislation clarifies issues related to non-menace dams in New Hampshire, and when the Dam Bureau can reclassify a non-menace dam to a higher classification based on the amount of water that the dam can discharge. So you'll see basically in the bill you're looking at some definitional changes and revisions in terms of how the department determines dams, and then that the middle of the bill, line 14, the revenue option was mentioned, plus the other funds a little bit farther on, and then on page 2 you're going to see the study committee set up to take a look at the other issues that I've described so far. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn testimony over to the more able folks behind me.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, come on back and join us. Corey Clark from DES. Good morning and welcome.
Morning, Vice Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Corey Clark, speaking on behalf of NHDES, and I am the Chief Engineer at the Dam Bureau. So as you have already heard, NHDES is responsible for the repair and reconstruction of roughly 273 state-owned dams and the daily operation and maintenance of roughly 208 of those dams. And so this bill would amend existing statutes to clarify when a non-menace dam can be reclassified and to clarify the type of revenue funds that can be deposited in the dam maintenance fund. I'll go into this a little bit more later. Additionally, this bill would create a study committee to review alternatives for funding the operation, maintenance, and repair of state-owned dams. So, of those 273 state-owned dams, the average age is roughly over 100 years old. And most of these dams are designed for a 50-year lifespan, and numerous have not seen upgrades in the last 40 to 50 years, or even longer. Analysis that was done last spring in-house at the Dam Bureau estimated the cost of rehabilitating all 273 state-owned dams to come into compliance with current standards would cost roughly $414 million. An estimated $300 million of that would be needed for the 63 high-hazard dams that are currently owned by the state. The cost of the operation and maintenance and repair of these dams is currently funded through a mix of the Dam Maintenance Fund, capital funds, and general funds. The sole source of the outside revenue from the Dam Maintenance Fund is rent payments NHDS receives from leasing 9 of these state-owned dams to private hydropower developers to generate electricity at those locations. Under the terms of the lease, the rent is paid to NHDS as a percentage of the revenue from the sale of power at those facilities. The Dam Maintenance Fund was established in 1989, and so for the first 13 years of that, the income into the Dam Maintenance Fund from the leasing of those hydropower sites pretty much covered all necessary expenses for the operation, repair, and maintenance of state-owned dams. At that time, those hydropower developers were getting power purchase agreements through PSNH of roughly 8 cents to 17 cents per kilowatt hour. However, in 2002, PSNH renegotiated their power purchase agreements as a response to RSA 374-F. And at that time, a lot of those renegotiations dropped the, essentially reduced the power purchase to market rates. And so last year, those market rates averaged about 3.6 cents per kilowatt hour. And that's what we're seeing based on our lease payments and the revenue generated at those 9 state sites. And so at that time, in 2000, after the 2002 change, in 2004, a legislative committee was formed under SB 488 to review the effects of the restructuring on the Dam Maintenance Fund. And that committee looked at several different revenue sources, such as the unrefunded road toll or gas tax to boaters, a shoreline maintenance fee, along with other items such as fishing license fees, boat registrations, mooring permit fees, et cetera. And however, subsequent legislation to implement those did not come to fruition, and therefore, currently, the Dam Bureau relies not only on the Dam Maintenance Fund, but also on the general fund and the capital fund to cover our operational expenses and for the repair and reconstruction of those 273 state-owned dams. So, one thing that this legislation, not only is it to establish a new committee similar to that 2004 committee to relook at the income coming into the Dam Maintenance Fund, but also the legislation would clarify the revenue resulting from any sales or transfers. Currently, the Dam Bureau, we're doing what we can to try to reduce this inventory. And so one avenue is to possibly sell some of these sites. And so currently, we're working with a hydropower developer to actually sell one of the state-owned dams at market rate. And the legislation would help amend and clarify exactly what can go into the Dam Maintenance Fund, not just revenue payments from leases, but also from any sales or transfers that could take place. The last thing that this legislation does is it works to amend current language that applies to non-menace dams. In 2017, SB 172 was enacted, and that essentially helped grandfather some of these non-menace dams. At that time, prior to then, NHDS, while non-menace dams were not inspected on a regular basis, they were inspected based on changing conditions out in the field, or every so often we try to roll in one of these non-menace dams into our inspection frequency just to make sure that things were meeting current classifications. And as a result, it was found that some of these dams that have not been inspected in decades were being inspected, and the result was hazard classifications were changing, and so impacts were being felt by the dam owners. And so the legislation essentially changed so that DES could only reclassify a dam if there was a substantial change on the downstream, such as if a house was built directly downstream or something to that. One thing that we did find, particularly this summer with the high flows, is that there was a non-menace dam up in Newport that was inspected in 2019, but due to the legislation, it was not reclassified. It should have been prior to that legislation, it would have been reclassified to likely either a low or significant hazard because of a downstream driveway that was immediately downstream. That driveway washed away during the summer due to the inadequate discharge capacity at that location, and therefore this proposed language would clarify it that even if you have a non-menace dam, you still have to make sure you meet the proper discharge requirements, meaning the amount of water that can go out during a given storm event, to ensure that you're not becoming an undue burden onto any downstream facilities. And so this helps clarify that. And so with that, I will open it up to any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. I guess the chair has one right away. So the study committee 20 years ago that occurred, have you re-looked at their findings, and would those findings still be relevant today? I guess my question is, do we need a new study committee, or are the findings of the previous ones still, would they be effective? And if we just implemented those changes, would that kind of help you fix the problem that you have?
Yeah, so at that time, we did look at, as I mentioned, several different things. The outcome was that there were two subsequent bills that came in, and neither one of those made it out of the legislature. I think at the time, because of the need, it was essentially thought as, okay, we can probably cover this with capital funds, and possibly general funds at that time. However, since then, one thing I'd like to point out is at that time in 2004, we had 29 high hazard dams. Currently, we have 63. Now, the state of New Hampshire is not building new dams. What's happening is it's downstream development and also better modeling technology. So back then, you do a lot of hand calculations. You would look at the maps and try to figure out, are there homes here or are there not? Currently, a lot of computer analysis can be done to really identify, are there homes within the breach area of these dams? And so therefore, that's why the number has doubled since then. And also as a result, 29 of those 63 high hazard dams are actually in poor condition. Because we have better modeling technology, we can really determine, do these dams meet the discharge capacity that they need to meet? So I guess where I'm going with this is, it goes back to the $300 million that we need for the rehabilitation of these high hazard dams. And so NHDS believes that the committee would help take what we did 20 years ago and build upon it to meet the current needs that we have today. Because unfortunately, the revenue into the dam maintenance fund really hasn't changed at all since 2004. In fact, it's continuing to decrease. Part of that is we have hydropower developers leaving sites over in Goffstown, Kelly's Falls Dam. That hydropower developer is pulling out of that location. And so it's really probably time to start looking at different revenue sources other than just trying to rely solely on these hydropower developers.
So you feel it'd be warranted to have a new study committee then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Further questions from the committee? Senator Waters.
Thanks. Thank you. Could you provide us, after the hearing, with a kind of a look at what the revenues are that have been coming in for the last several years, so we have a sense of this, what that relationship that bears to the 300 million. And then I don't know whether it was DES put this bill together, but I don't think we're going to have 3 senators and 6 House members on it. So unless you have any objection, I would imagine what we might end up with is 1 senator, 1 member of finance, 1 of Fish and Game, and 1 from RR&D. And I say that out loud as much for my colleagues to hear. But I think that's, given the short timeline for the committee, that's much more realistic. But otherwise, that's it. If you could just provide us with that information, it'd be
Sure.
helpful. Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Rainey, you signed in. Anything you want to add, or you're good? All right, awesome. Anybody else that would like to testify on Senate Bill 549? Seeing none, we will close the hearing. All right, good morning. We will open the hearing on Senate Bill 539, and we'll introduce introduce the prime sponsor, Senator Keith Murphy, to introduce the bill. Good
Good
morning.
morning, colleagues. Keith Murphy, representing District 16. For about 115 years, there's been a dam in the center of Goffstown. It's the Hadley Falls Dam. It was used to generate electricity. The problem is that the dam doesn't produce enough, so no one wants to operate the dam under the FERC license. And DES has said that they don't want the state to have the liability and expense of maintaining the dam. So, the dam must go. It's coming out. They offered the town the chance to buy the dam. The town doesn't necessarily want the expense. It needs about possibly $10 million worth of maintenance work. This problem is about to be repeated across our state. There are hundreds of dams that are at risk of losing their FERC license. And I've handed out a list that I did obtain recently from DES of non-viable dams. So the legislation in front of you does two things. Number one, it basically says DES must give towns the opportunity to purchase a dam or take ownership of a dam. And two, it provides for the creation of a dam maintenance fund. There would be a revolving loan fund. Many of these impoundments create a lot of property value. That property value results in higher property taxes. The towns have a lot to lose, not just in terms of recreational opportunity or in terms of scenery, but in terms of property value and property taxes. Nationally, over 50% of the value of a piece of property that's waterfront is there because it's on the water. If that water goes away, the property values shrink tremendously. So legislation is meant to create a process by which towns or other interested parties, such as an association of abutters, can take ownership of these dams and provide for their maintenance. There is an amendment that we have requested to match the amendment that was passed over in the House. The same bill was filed in the House by some Goffstown legislators. And that amendment we should have to you today. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. We did, just so you know, Mr. Chairman, we did work closely with DES on producing this legislation. So with the amendment, I think that you'll see there's widespread agreement. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm following through on the progression. So a town has a dam that is going to be closed down
And removed, yes.
and removed. And so this would allow the opportunity for people who live on opposite sides of the riverbank to form an organization to own that privately.
The bill as envisioned would allow towns the first opportunity,
A municipality.
yes, ma'am, to take ownership of the dam and liability and responsibility for its maintenance.
Okay.
If they choose. If they choose not to do so, it would allow for an association of abutters to then do so.
Follow. So I'm just following through. So right of first refusal goes to the town where the dam is located.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if the town is like, nope, this is not something that, they go to town meeting and the town is like, no, we can't do this. We don't want to do this.
Yes.
Then the next offer in the lineup goes to immediate abutters.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And
Or
then
an-
if,
an association of interested parties.
oh, okay.
So it wouldn't necessarily
Association of-
be just limited to abutters.
Okay.
Maybe there's an association that is formed of people that live within so many feet of the shoreline,
I
or
see.
something of that nature.
But it's private.
Yes.
Okay. And once, let's say that's private or it gets together and they're like, yeah, we want to do this. then, if I understand this correctly, this group, however it's formed, like the We Love Dam group, may now apply for a loan, right, to take ownership and maintenance?
As part of the transfer, they would be given,
I'm looking at
whether it's
line
the,
21, yeah,
Okay.
I'm just trying to follow the SOP on this.
okay. Let me just pull up the bill, ma'am.
Oh.
You have the amendment?
Oh, here's the amendment, never mind,
Yes,
okay.
we do. If you want to speak to the differences in the amendment specifically for the benefit of the committee, we'll
Yeah, that'd be
take
great.
the time to do that too.
Yeah, so this amendment passed the House committee, our counterparts next door, unanimously, 19-0. So a lot of it is sort of cleaning up the prior language in the bill. For example, the bill initially said there'd be 5% interest rate, and this amendment cleans that up and allows for a variable interest rate. And there was language the DES asked for regarding essentially covering the cost of maintaining and administering the fund. Now, I understand that we're not finance, obviously, but there is no money other than $1 appropriated to that maintenance fund in the initial bill. So that still has to go to finance, and they can decide if and when that has to be funded.
Okay, so it looks like you've expanded section 2 of the bill a bit, just quickly looking at it. I haven't had a chance to quite get it completely read out, read all of the details yet, but anything specific in there, or is it just,
Section 2, I'm looking at amendment 227H. Is that the right amendment?
we have amendment 0324S. Could you give Senator Murphy a copy of that new amendment that you just gave us? So that we're all working off the same sheet? 0324S?
Yeah, I don't have a copy of that amendment with me.
We
I
gotta
believe it was
grab
just
one.
prepared this morning.
I think it's hot off the presses. Still,
Thank you. This was hot off the press.
so looking on page 2, section 2 looks to be significantly more expansive than the original section 2 of the bill.
Yeah, this was language that was requested by DES and the Municipal Association.
Okay. If you prefer, we can let them explain too. If
They would be able to do a better job because
Okay.
frankly, they attended the House Committee
Sure.
hearing, which was 2 weeks ago, and there was a lot of emails flying back and forth on this.
Fair enough.
So, I mean, I can speak to it, but they'll be better prepared than I will be.
That's fine. Senator Altshuler, did your question completely answered, or did you have more questions?
Not yet. I have a
Okay.
lot of damn questions.
There was a lot of punditry
Okay,
about that.
after your eye jokes,
I know.
I mean,
set a
come
bad
on.
precedent
Yeah.
last week.
I'm not even close to your eye jokes, not even close.
No eye rolls here today.
Oh, God. Yeah, he's quick today, folks. So in the amendment, I know that it's not, committed to memory yet, but I think I'm starting to understand the process. So when the state wants to not take responsibility and they're going to give the opportunity to a municipality, right? And the municipality is like, yes, we're going to do this. We would like to we would like to maintain ownership. It seems that on page 2, section 2, in lines 4 through 8, there will be a loan fund available for a municipality to tap into to assist with acquiring and maintaining the dam. Is that, what? It doesn't say acquire.
No, in the
To
case of Goffstown,
fund-
DES offered to transfer the dam for basically free.
I
The
see.
state just doesn't want the responsibility of maintaining and owning the dam and the liability.
Okay. All right, thank you. That makes more sense there. And then I guess what I'm looking for is the next step when a municipality is like, we're not going to take responsibility. We can't, that's not what we can do right now. But there is an interested group of people, whoever they are, who want to maintain this dam. They can apply for maintenance funds from the state to maintain this as a private entity? Is that what this, am I understanding like the progress of how this works?
After the,
Is it a loan or is it like,
If it's made to the municipality, it is a loan, which would then be repaid by the municipality
Got that.
with interest.
Okay. So it's a loan.
Yeah. I'm reading the amendment, and
Yeah.
it does not say where any interested party would have the opportunity to access that loan.
Okay.
At least not that I can see.
Yeah, that's the part I'm looking for, is that,
It
does
says-
like, say, you know, the six of us here at this table, we're going to enter into an agreement to be the owners of a particular dam. Can we apply to that loan fund?
As originally envisioned in the initial bill,
That's-
the answer would be yes.
Oh, okay, but not in the
In
amendment.
the amendment, I do not see where it says, lines 4 and 5 on page 2,
Yes,
to provide loans to fund the maintenance, repair, removal, or improvement of any municipally owned dam.
okay,
So it seems to limit it to municipalities.
okay. So if the six of us here wanted to step in where a municipality had taken a pass after having right of first refusal, we would have to come up with our own funding independent of this loan fund. Like, this is only available for municipalities.
That's my reading of the amendment.
Got
Yes,
it.
ma'am.
Thank you.
And this is exactly what passed the House.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, hold on, Senator Waters snuck in under the wire.
I'm sorry. Senator, I think maybe we need a little clarification, because if you look at the bottom of page 1 of the amendment in section 4, and lines 28 there, it says, "A process by which municipalities or other interested parties who are capable of assessing local property taxes or issuing debt," which sounds kind of like special district to me. But then when you do look at line
May apply for a loan. So,
then on the line 5 on page 2, it says any municipally owned dam. So it seems to me that what we would need to do is make sure the language on lines 28 and 9 on page 1 are in accordance with lines 4 and 5 on page 2.
I would agree with you, sir.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll talk to DES, but doesn't that, it looks like to me like there's a little,
I agree. And
Yeah.
to be frank, this is the first time I've seen this language.
Yeah, well, whatever, yeah.
Holding it in my
but it
hand.
looks like a good amendment. I mean, I can see what they did to flesh the fund out, so, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Further questions? Seeing none? We appreciate it.
Thanks, Chairman.
Corey Clark, or DS. Welcome again.
Thank you. Once again, thank you, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Corey Clark here representing DES, and I am the Chief Engineer of the NHDES Dam Bureau. And so just to clarify a couple of things, it's, once again, NHDS owns 273 state-owned dams. The state of New Hampshire owns 273 state-owned dams. And due to that increasing inventory and the costs associated with maintaining that inventory, we are looking at different ways of reducing that inventory. So one of them being possibly removing some of these dams that no longer fit the need or the function that they were originally designed to be. So in the case of Hadley Falls Dam, this is a hydropower dam that NHDS owns. NHDS has owned that dam since 1968. Hydropower was generally ran at that site until 2007, and since that time, NHDS has been trying to get a new hydropower developer at that location. As you already heard, that location has a license through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission because it produces hydropower. So therefore, we are under FERC jurisdiction and FERC regulatory requirements. Because we haven't been producing hydropower at that facility since 2007, FERC has been pushing DES to either restart hydropower at that facility or possibly surrender the license. And we were unable to get a new developer into that location. Therefore, we decided last year to move towards the surrendering process because of and when we moved into that direction, we either need to rehabilitate the dam to meet FERC requirements prior to the surrendering, or remove the dam as part of that surrender process. when we were looking at the needs of that dam to come up to current regulatory standards, in 2020, we did a stability analysis that found that the dam is deficient. So essentially, to bring that dam up to current standards, we'd have to completely renovate the existing dam at a cost somewhere in the order of between $5 and $10 million. That's something that we are continuing to hone in on, but what it boils down to is there's really no outside funding other than a couple of small federal sources to get funding for the repair and reconstruction of state-owned dams. However, there are funding sources to possibly remove some of these structures. And so NHDS, as part of the surrender application, is looking to remove the dam and go after some federal funding to remove that site, so it's not a burden on New Hampshire funding. So essentially, this bill creates a process in which, when we decide, similar to Hadley Falls, that we are going to seek removing a dam, we first offer it up to the municipality. In most cases, these projects take years and years to implement, so the issue of offering up to municipality is not an issue. In fact, we worked really closely with all the municipalities when we decide to go down this avenue to do this. However, this bill does create a mechanism for doing that. Currently, as I already mentioned for the previous testimony, NHDS does follow the process of RSA 440 when we are surplusing state land, in which we have to go through CORD, long-range planning, and governing council to do so. Because when we're doing a removal, we're not actually really surplusing anything, we are just removing it. This creates a mechanism in which kind of follows that 440 process in which we have to offer it up to municipalities. And so the loan program, now DES did have a similar dam maintenance revolving loan fund program that was essentially funded out of administrative fines. Unfortunately, we only, and that program came into play about 2009, we only had about $70,000 in that program, and therefore, as we've heard today, that $70,000 doesn't get you very far when you're trying to rehabilitate a dam. Therefore, that loan program was repealed in 2019 because of insufficient funding. So this loan program creates a new mechanism in which we can offer loans to municipalities or other entities, and essentially it also builds upon the administrative duties that NHDS would have on that loan program, and a lot of those duties and the way we administer the program is similar to how DES already administers other loan programs throughout all different sectors of the state. So with that, I will open up to any questions.
Thank you for your testimony.
Do you want to go?
Senator Waters, I know has a question.
Thank you. I have a few. Let me start with the kind of bureaucratic ones. Do you have a copy of the amendment?
I have a copy of the House bill that was discussed, that was passed, the amendment for the House.
Okay,
And
so as far as I can tell, it looks like that language was just transferred into a Senate amendment.
I believe so, and that was,
My quick review of the two, it appears it's the same. So there, he's talking about Amendment 2278, which is what Senator Murphy had, which was an amendment to House Bill 1429. But the amendment that you all have is 324S, which amends Senate Bill 539. So we've taken that language and just moved it into Senate.
Yes, so could we give him a copy of 324S?
Do we have another copy handy? Of 324? All right, if you could provide one would be great. And again, I believe it's the same language. So
It is, but I
if you've
want
got
to,
notes on your other one,
I have these line numbers, so I want to work
Yes.
off of this one.
Got it. Thank you. And Rep. Mazer, my apologies, I didn't see your name on the sign-up sheet. I will put you on next in case you have another commitment, okay?
Okay, so if I may, Mr. Chairman, I want to go through a few things in this. And it looks like we will not exec today, but next week, so if you're going to have some changes for us, maybe by the end of this week would be good. So if you look on the 324S, down at lines 28 and 29,
yep,
so you see there the definition of municipalities or other interested parties who are capable of assessing local property taxes or issuing debt. Okay? They qualify for the loan. If you look at page 2, on line 4, it just says municipally owned dam. So I think what you want to do is to put there on line 5 the same language as you have on lines 28 and 29. Okay? The other thing, so you got that?
Yep.
All right. The other question is that notice on lines 29 and 30 on page 1, you've got repair maintenance of non-state-owned dams. And then note on line 5 on page 2, you have maintenance, repair, removal, or improvement. So I think what you need to do is to have that language that is on line 5 put back, have it be repeated on lines 29 and 30 on page 1. You got that?
Yes, thank you.
Now, the other issue is, because the word removal there, I have a couple of questions about that. So, you have the list of dams, huh? You got this?
That,
Yeah, maybe you could pass it over to him. So what I'm trying to get at here, two issues. Let me mention another one first, before we get to the list. Let's say down the road that a municipality or another organization has taken a dam, and it gets so clotted with cyanobacteria that it's a health threat, and they decide, oh my, we've got to remove it. That seems maybe the best option. So I think that there should be some language in the bill and in the rulemaking that if that possibility arises, then such dam could be eligible for the funding that is for the removal of dams from Fish and Game or from the feds. I just think it makes sense, because it's a public good. In certain circumstances, the public good of removal is a public good.
yes, certainly. And for, from the dam safety side of our house, whenever an owner comes to us and says, what can I do to fix my problem? Removal is always one option.
Yeah.
So that's
But you
certainly.
see what I'm saying? I think it'd
Yeah.
be good to have in this bill some language that directs you in rules to the possibility that after this transfer has been made, that the municipal or other type of owner would be able to come to you for assistance in getting the funding that's available for dam removal. Okay?
Yes, yes. And at DES, we do have a river restoration coordinator, and his purpose is to help
Yeah.
dam owners
Right, I
navigate.
know. I just
Okay.
think that since we're setting up this fund,
Yep.
and the fund makes it look like sayonara, that you ought to, I think it'd probably be most appropriate to say that in the rules that the rulemaking, you would take care of that issue, okay?
Okay.
Now, the other, related to that, I'm not sure, you got the list now?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not sure, but my suspicion is that the Bellamy River Wildlife Pond at the bottom here,
Yes.
the first page, and the Durham Adams Point Wildlife Pond Dam, and the Hoyt Pond in Madbury may be head of tide dams, or in terms of passage from anadromous species.
Quite possibly, yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
given their location.
So could you look into that? And if that's the case, would you please consider some language that says, in the case of such dams that relate to the possible increase of the passage of anadromous species, that the department would not transfer such dams without consideration of the benefit of removal for the passage of anadromous species. So I think it's such a coastal priority to do that. And I think that if somebody comes forward and says, well, we want to keep that impoundment because we like it, well, maybe that should be weighed before they automatically have the option to apply to take the dam. So I don't know whether this is actually an issue, but I'd like you to think about it, because I really think that we need to remove the head of anything that's passes of anadromous species. Although I don't mean up in Ossipee, because I know Elvers can get hell of a way up the rivers, but I'm talking about in the coastal zone.
Okay, yeah, because certainly there's, I mean, even the Merrimack watershed, there's plenty of dams that have issues due to the Andromenous fish passage.
These are small impoundments, and I just, maybe we don't do anything about it, but please take a look at these and just let me know whether or not there ought to be, if you think it'd be helpful to have some language about the anadromous passage and anadromous, that just maybe if you think there should be, then you could find a way, again, on the rulemaking to account for that kind of dam.
So generally, when a senator puts in a bill requesting a new study committee, they are automatically signing up to be the one that serves on it, but it sounds like Senator Waters might have the technical expertise.
No
to take
study committee in this one.
Oh, that's right, that was the last bill, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All right, I guess you're off the hook.
I'm going to dodge that draft.
Further questions from the committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing none, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. I'm sure we'll need some further technical advice. And Senator Waters, and I assume you'll be willing to work on perhaps.
Oh, yeah,
this
yeah, yeah,
item.
we'll see. I mean, again,
Okay.
they'll tell me whether I make any sense.
Sure.
Sounds good, thank you.
They'll tell me
I think we'll
nicely
leave
whether
that
I make
topic
any
for a different
sense.
committee. All right, Rep. Mazer, again, my apologies. You're on a different sheet, and I didn't see you in the beginning. Welcome to Energy and Natural Resources.
Thank you. This is my first time here, so thank you. Good morning, honorable members of the Senate. My name is Representative Lisa Mazer, and I represent the great towns of Goffstown and Ware. I come before you today to speak in support of SB 539. This bill addresses a matter of great importance to our communities, our dams and waterways. This proposed legislation is a step towards enhancing local control and ensuring the sustainable management of these vital resources. One of the towns I represent, Goffstown, has residents who will be impacted by 3 dams that came under recent scrutiny by FERC: the Hadley Falls, Greggs Falls, and Kelly Falls dams. Lately, I have become aware of more dams across our state who are being hit with the same federal requirements and are facing hard decisions about their dams and waterways as well. The state of New Hampshire took ownership of the Hadley Falls Dam in Goffstown in 1968, and it began producing hydroelectric power from then until that ceased happening in 2007. In 2013, DES became the sole licensee of the dam. Between January and March 2023, DES and FERC's efforts to negotiate a new lease had failed to come to acceptable terms. Then in April of 2023, DES advised our town and other stakeholders that they had decided to surrender the dam license and begin the process of dam removal. This decision was a surprise to all in attendance. We were blindsided. As earlier communication indicated, surrendering the license was only a consideration. Additionally, the 2 other dams mentioned previously were on FERC's radar as dams that required resolution as well. In turn, this decision blindsided, as mentioned, our community, as it affects not only waterfront owners, but our entire town. There are recreational events like our annual pumpkin regatta that some of you may have attended before, that happen in Goffstown that center around these dams that bring in significant financial revenue to local businesses as well. Goffstown was left with little options, but if this bill was in place during discussions about Hadley Falls, we may have been able to save the license and had another option. SB 539, as amended, would present options and opportunities for municipalities to have a more direct say in the management of these critical infrastructures. By providing an option to bring ownership to the local level, we can ensure that town decisions regarding their dams and waterways align with the unique needs and priorities of their communities. This bill is not just about transferring ownership. It's about empowering New Hampshire communities to be active custodians of these valuable assets. Of course, we understand that with this newfound responsibility comes the need for careful planning, expertise, and financial commitment. However, we are confident that with the support of the community and collaboration with relevant stakeholders, we can successfully navigate these challenges and ensure a smooth transition. DS sent you a letter with their approval, and there is bipartisan support on this, as well as many New Hampshire communities are going through similar situations. In conclusion, this bill will not require a municipality to take ownership of their dams, but it will provide them an option to do so. I ask the members of the Senate to consider the profound implications of this legislation as an opportunity for local empowerment, sustainability, and community-driven progress. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee?
Thank you.
Seeing none?
Thank
Thank you. Catherine Heck from the Municipal Association. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, and thank you, Senator Pearl, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Catherine Heck. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are here just to speak on the bill as it is enabling legislation. It creates a local option, and we had wanted to reiterate that we worked very closely with both the sponsors and DES on the amendment that you see before you, so I am glad that you have that to contemplate, and we want to continue to work on making sure this legislation can be enacted. Just to be very clear, municipalities currently can go through a process with DES, and we're authorized under law to go through like a bonding issue to take on a dam. What we don't have authority to do is some kind of a loan program. So that's where we're looking to refine the language, if that opportunity is advantageous and becomes available, that we would have the permission to do so. In addition, the amendment addresses all the legal and technical concerns and brings a few additional ones forward that we would like to address, but ensuring that municipalities can't be tied to taking on debt on behalf of an interested party. The interested party has to assess that debt on their own, whether it's a special purpose district or an association of private landowners. So I think that the amendment does accomplish what the bill now sets out to do, and as a local option, we always support local options for our communities to do what's best.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions? Senator Waters.
Thank you. So you mentioned association of landowners. Now, they wouldn't have taxing authority, would they?
They might not have taxing authority. They perhaps would have, unless they're like a special purpose district that's created. However, they could have the ability, and we made sure the language was in there, even though that's not kind of our area, to make sure they could issue debt. So I'm thinking of the Land Conservancy, the New Hampshire, a large group might be able to issue the debt necessary to move forward with this, and we don't want to preclude that potential opportunity.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, so under the language of the bill or the amendment, if you look at the House version or the amended version, it does not, it says only municipalities or entities that have tax authority. So if you want those other folks to be eligible for the loan fund, that's going to have to be put in the bill.
So again, our area of focus was not on outside groups perhaps, but it does say capable of assessing local property taxes or issuing debt. It was an or. We put
Okay,
in.
so that covers.
I
We're good.
we believe that covers it.
Okay, thank you.
But again, we're
Thank you.
not
That's helpful.
representing
Good.
private
Thank you.
associations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So we're happy to continue to work on this language so that this local option can move forward.
I think, not that this is kind of an executive committee, but take a look under the loan fund, because I don't see the or issue debt under the revolving loan fund established. I think that might need to be
Yeah, I think
added
that's
there.
why I think we've got to
Yes.
make sure that we have the same in both places.
Yes, I believe you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Altshuler, I missed you.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. So while we're talking about ownership and the transfer of ownership, would the transfer of ownership, if it were to a private group capable of issuing debt, would they then have the ability to block access to the river
I don't,
because of private ownership?
I don't
Is that a,
I don't believe so,
No?
because the river is, yeah, it's not owned and it's not deeded property.
but the dam would be, so the access to it would be.
And again, that is, working out with DES, and I would assume that the legislation allows for a lot of rulemaking in this area. So I don't believe that could be possible, but it's a great question. So I think that's one that DES would probably be better suited to answer around covenants and private landowners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you. Corey, do you want to come back and try and answer that question real quick before I close the hearing? You're welcome. I think it's a great question. Senator Altshuler, if you want to ask that same question to Corey.
Sure. So thank you very much. In the event that a municipality takes ownership of a dam, it's then, a common good. But if an organization gets together of private owners who have the capability of issuing debt, can they then block access to that property?
It could be looked at a couple different ways. So we have, we have what we call kind of run-of-the-river dams. These are dams that are on the river, obviously. If there was a public access point that is owned by the state as part of the dam, and if that dam was to be transferred to the municipality or another entity, and say that boat ramp or the parcel is part of that transfer, they would become stewards of that and could use it as they see fit. So even a municipality could say, charge, I would think they could have a fee, or, you have to be a resident to use it, that sort of thing. However, the water itself is within the state. So, anybody can use, they may have to access it at a different location, but they could still use that water as they see fit. It also comes into play a little bit when you look at, say it's a pond, and so it's not part of a river or anything like that. Obviously, water bodies over 10 acres in size are held in the public trust, so residents in New Hampshire can use that water as they see fit. Access to that water is not necessarily always a guarantee as part of that public trust. Certainly, we try to maintain that public access and everything else. However, there are certainly water bodies that are held in the public trust in which the state of New Hampshire does not own the dam. It's either owned by either a municipality or it's owned by a lake association or village district. And in those cases, sometimes public access does become an issue because it is within the public trust, and there's other avenues in the state to look at that access. So I can't say it's a guarantee that public access at the dam, if the dam was to transfer, would be maintained, but it's certainly something that could be potentially incorporated as part of the deed transfer that takes place. So when the deed is transferred to the town, they would get not only the dam, but they would get all the flowage rights, because you have to have the ability to flow on. So a lot of these locations, the state of New Hampshire, the dams that we own, we don't actually own the entire pond bottom. We may own a portion of it that's in the public trust, but we have usually some flowage. So there's private abutters that own down to the water and actually under the water. And so we have flowage on their deeds to do that. And so that would all transfer to the new owner and any other rights. Now, I suppose the state could certainly look into incorporating an additional stipulation within that deed as part of the transfer, that public access needs to be maintained. But currently, not all dams have public access right at the dam, so it'd be kind of on a case-by-case basis.
May I follow up with one more? So, understood with the public access, with regard to the public access. In the event that a private entity takes ownership of a dam, and at some point or another, they, are in they are not part of the loan program anymore, and they interrupt the flow for their own uses. Where does this make sure that there is some continuity in flow usage?
So, so in this case, it would be an entity that took over a state dam and wanted to cut back flows, so to speak, to limit downstream flows. So currently, there's no legislative requirements for even the state to maintain downstream flows unless that river system is part of another statutory program, such as the DES in-stream flow program. And so it would be, once again, it could be part of the transfer, part of the requirement as the deeds that they maintain set downstream flows. A lot of those downstream flows come into play a lot more when it's a hydropower site. So FERC has a lot more regulatory oversight on downstream flows and that sort of thing. And so take this one hydropower dam that we're transferring. That FERC requirement is still, that entity already holds the license because they're leasing the site from us. And so they will hold the license once it is sold. And as part of that license requirement, they are required to meet certain downstream flow requirements.
And that's in perpetuity?
As long as the license is in effect. As soon as the license is surrendered, those requirements go away. The dam at that point in time transfers to state jurisdiction. Currently, the state of New Hampshire Dam Bureau does not have the authority to dictate you need to release this or you need to release that. That comes into play with possibly other programs, but currently there's no requirement through the Dam Safety Regulatory Program.
Thank you.
Further question? I think we got it. Thank you for coming back.
No problem.
Anybody else want to testify on Senate Bill 539? Seeing none, I'm going to close the hearing. All right, next we will open up the hearing on Senate Bill 492. I see the prime sponsor is here. Welcome, Senator Ricciardi.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, members of Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and thank you for hearing Senate Bill 492. For the record, I'm Denise Ricciardi, State Senator for District 9, 13 beautiful towns from Bedford to Hinsdale. Senate Bill 492 clarifies the following for purposes of making RSA 486 clearly defined so that it can be applied in a consistent manner. Clarification of the term interceptor sewer. Delete intercepting in 8 locations can clearly define the varying wastewater collection sizes, eligibility of New Hampshire's community systems, and allow the statute to be applied consistently. Deleting the word intercepting will allow DES to be consistent in its rules, definitions, as it relates to the state aid grant program for wastewater infrastructure. Most importantly, this has implications for state aid grants. Deleting the word intercepting will ensure that all sewers, intercepting or collector, qualify for the SAG state aid grant program. This is critical in clearly understanding the state and municipal funding partnership relative to the total municipal bond debt that voters will be asked to approve at a local level. Wastewater operator certification fee. The fee has been $50 since 1996 and generates an average of $15,000 per year. This does not even begin to cover the costs of the program or maintaining the DES training center. Clarification for consulting engineer. The Department of Environmental Services establishes rules governing the pre-qualification of consulting engineering firms for water supply and pollution control projects, and this change clarifies that. The New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services staff and others are here to provide more detailed information and to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions? Seeing none? Next, we will bring up Tracy Wood. Good morning. Nope, push a button.
Okay,
There
thank
you
you. Good morning, Vice Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this bill. There are three parts, and the first part is the removal of the word or the descriptor word intercepting from the state aid grant program. I believe everyone's familiar with the state aid grant program. It's also known as Buco Bucks, if you've seen it come through. But this program gives aid to municipalities for water pollution control projects, for wastewater treatment facility upgrades, pump stations, and sewers. It gives 20%. It's an after-the-fact grant program that gives 20% on principal and interest to communities. So why is intercepting important? Being in this business for 30 years, if you ask 10 different engineers what intercepting means, you may get 10 different answers. At one point, we had laterals, we had collectors, we had interceptors, we had trunk sewers. And so why can't we just have sewers? And so we're going to simplify it and call it sewers. This is very important because of the interpretation by different engineers. When communities are planning for their projects that cost a lot of money, they need to determine the affordability of their project. And so they're looking at all funding sources because they're going to need to leverage funding sources to be able to afford these projects. So they need to know clearly what is eligible for funding under the state aid grant program so they can include that in their overall funding package. The next item is the certification of wastewater operators, and as mentioned, that fee has not changed since 1996. So we are responsible in my bureau for the certification and training of wastewater operators in the state of New Hampshire. We do this at our state-owned facility in Franklin, New Hampshire, which is located adjacent to the regional wastewater treatment facility, the Winnipesaukee River Basin Program. The facility is outdated and is going to need upgrades, including probably a new roof fairly soon. But more importantly, we don't have the proper technology that we need to train our wastewater operators. We have currently about 470 in the state. Just like you've heard across the state, there's workforce shortages. We are looking at retirement rate of 15% in the next 5 years, another 15% in the next 5, and so on and so on. And so we need to have facilities that are appropriate to train these operators. Our wastewater treatment facilities are getting more and more complex to operate, and so we need to provide training that is adequate and commensurate with what we're asking our facilities to do. And then the third is the easiest of all. So we are about to readopt our EMV C500, our pre-qualification of engineers for certain projects. And in that, we've recently had people apply to that program, individual engineers. And we are not in the business of certifying individual engineers. That's what I go to as an engineer, to the New Hampshire Office of Professional Licensing and Certification. What we are in the business of is qualifying consulting engineering firms to do our large infrastructure projects. So we want to pre-qualify engineers to make sure that they have the abilities, the experience abilities, the depth and breadth to be able to complete those projects. So this change will consolidate and confirm that we actually are pre-qualifying consulting engineering firms and not individual consulting engineers. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. I know I have one question. So if we're changing this, the last section you were talking about, from consulting engineers to consulting engineering firms, would this mean each firm would have to pay the $200, not each engineer?
Exactly. So the firm pays the fee, and it's a $200 fee for the initial pre-qualification, and then there's an annual renewal fee of $50.
So previously, if you had a firm with 3 engineers, they might have been subject to 3 sets of these fees with the same firm?
Well, we actually, we're updating our rules, and in our rules, they actually had in there that they had an individual category. We have never pre-qualified an individual, nor would we want to. Because if you think about, Portsmouth Pierce Island project, that's a $93 million project that we funded. And you can't have one person design and build and see that project through. You need a whole firm that has the depth and breadth with multiple disciplines, multiple layers of engineers to make sure that project succeeds. So we're going to be removing in our rules the selection for individual, and then this will I don't want to say consolidate, but this will confirm that we just do consulting engineering firms and not individuals.
It'll make it consistent with your rules.
Be consistent, yes.
Okay. Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bill, Bill, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. I'm going to let you do it.
Is this still on?
It is.
Okay. Hounsell, Hounsell, Bill Hounsell. And I'm representing Granite State Rural Water Association. I work for them as a policy analyst. And then I'm representing 2 precincts, North Conway Water Precinct and Lower Bartlett Water Precinct, which took great advantage of the state aid grant program. Small precincts built $75 million worth of infrastructure because of this state aid grant matched with federal funds. This clarification on the intercepting parts is critical to, from municipality point of view, is critically important because it allows the people voting the bonds to clearly understand the partnership that the state has. We're excited after many years that unanimously the Senate supported the $15 million flatline funding for the program. So now the money's there to help build all this infrastructure that's needed, particularly now for housing. You can't have any density at all to accommodate your housing needs without wastewater. And the protection of the water is essential to wastewater being put in place. Many septic systems are failing. And then with the PFOs and all the other contaminant issues going on, we're putting a lot of waste on the land. Up in North Conway, that little precinct had a warning from the National Geological Survey that nitrates from the private septic systems were headed to the aquifer. That built big 100-year floodplain is a big underground lake, an aquifer. And that would contaminate that water for 1,000 years, nitrates would. Nitrates is basically urine that finds its way through the land. So in 25 years working aggressively with this program, we've gotten everybody off that system. Also, what we've accomplished by 400 people, making it affordable to do that at their level, and not only for themselves, but for the whole valley. So they've got a plant with a capacity, tertiary biological treatment facility that goes into rapid infiltration basins, a glacial drift deposit, if you will, 30 feet above the Saco River. So it doesn't even go into the river with an EPA, a discharge permit. And given that, it's a wonderful jewel for the valley. It allows all of the water we take out to put right back into the aquifer. And secondly, it becomes the size of the city of Rochester overnight, that valley. It goes from 15,000 to 36,000, about the size of Rochester. And that could not have been accomplished without the wastewater system being put in place. And the wastewater system could not have been put in place without the state aid grant. Now we come to the word interceptor. It needs to be very clearly defined when we sell those bonds. And believe me, it's tough to get these bonds passed at the local level, as you know, to have the people understand the partnership is clearly defined. Taking out interception makes it clearly defined because it says sewer systems. Now you're a partner to all they construct. And all that debt is at the local level. And the grant is just an annual principal and interest payment to help them leverage that. $600 million worth of debt takes $15 million a year. Now that puts us in position to fight for the federal money that comes loose to help New Hampshire build the tremendous amount of water wastewater infrastructure needed. Taking this word out is going to allow bonds to pass. And recently, in 2 communities, bonds failed. And they failed because it's a tough job to convince the multitude to pass bonds or the simple majority. So I hope you continue to clarify the program, make it concise. And secondly, it helps both financially, the municipality and the DES. Because the key part now is in this bill is addressing the trailer bill last session that put into law July 1st of 23. The municipalities only have 1 year from final completion, and there's a year warranty before any money comes from any of the grants. That 1 year, you now have just that 1 year to get your application in and get certified by the Department of Environmental Services for being ready to go to Governor Council for payment. If you miss that, you lose it, and so that's critical. This needs to be streamlined, taking out any subjective understanding about what parts of the project may or may not be eligible. Takes away a tremendous amount of work at the DES level and at the municipal level. The DES under law is supposed to help municipalities all the way through the process. Well, once the final completion's done, the municipalities have to reproduce all of the invoices and approvals, even though the DES approved them all the way through. That paperwork takes a while, so that application takes a while. The more we can streamline it under this program, the simpler it's going to be, and the more even the flow of the projects ready to go to the Governor and Council will be to match the $15 million a year we put in. So there's a great linkage between this bill and making this program work out in a very nice manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, appreciate it. Catherine Heck from the Municipal Association. You're our final speaker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Catherine Heck, and I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association. And I want to not belabor any points. I think all the previous speakers have touched on all the main points, but to say that we are in strong support of this bill. Normally, you see me here asking you for money. In this case, I'm asking for a policy change to be supported that would allow us to leverage dollars that have been wildly successful. The state aid grant program you put into the state budget every single year. It is a program that, to everyone's point, does allow municipalities to leverage these extra dollars at 20%. And this clears up what is eligible and ineligible for that. This partnership has allowed hundreds of millions of dollars in the past and moving forward of water and wastewater infrastructure to move forward. And we simply cannot expand housing or have clean water in our state and protect our natural resources without programs and partnerships. So I want to thank you for your past support in funding this program and to consider this important policy change moving forward so that we have an easier time at the municipal level of understanding what is eligible, passing the bonds necessary, and issuing the debt, you know, the 20 to 30-year debt that we need in order to move these very expensive projects forward.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none? Anybody else that would like to testify on Senate Bill 492? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing.
I will open the hearing on Senate Bill 329 and invite the prime sponsor, Senator Pearl, up. Welcome.
Good morning, and welcome to my fellow committee members. I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 329. For the record, my name is Howard Pearl, representing District 17, and I live in the fabulous town of Loudon. Senate Bill 329 comes to us today because we passed Senate Bill, I think it was 211, is that right? 211 last year. It was a bill that I introduced for DES in this area of criminal background checks, and we passed the bill, but we found there was some technical issues, and I have a whole list of what the bill actually does, but I think I'm going to let Mike Wimsatt actually get into the technical details. He's the director from DES, and I want to let him talk about them because many of these changes are just kind of technical cleanups that we needed to do from the bill that we passed from last year. So I'm going to keep my testimony very short, and I'm going to ask Director Wimsatt to kind of speak to the details, if that's okay with the committee.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you. Mike, come on down.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mike Wimsatt. I serve as Director of the Waste Management Division for the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. And I appreciate the opportunity to come and testify in support of Senate Bill 329 this morning. So as Senator Pearl indicated in his introduction of the bill, really this bill is solely does one thing. It corrects a drafting error that occurred in Senate Bill 211 last year. So Senate Bill 211, the purpose of it was we learned before last year's session that the language in, longstanding language in both our hazardous waste and solid waste management acts regarding giving us directives to conduct performance history reviews and criminal background checks on applicants for solid and hazardous waste permits, that language was not correct. And the reason it wasn't correct is that when we asked the Attorney General and the New Hampshire State Police to review the records and the history of our applicants for solid and hazardous waste permits, the criminal background checks are done on officers and directors and key employees and a series of folks who are in a position to, influence how a hazardous waste or solid waste facility is run. In order to do those checks, the state, New Hampshire State Police and the Federal Bureau of Investigations have very specific requirements in what that statutory language should look like in order to have the authority to access those criminal records databases. And the language in our statute needed to be updated to reflect and be consistent with those requirements. So Senate Bill 211 sought to make changes in 4 areas, 2 in each statute. So for permits and permit applicants and permit transfer applicants in the hazardous waste program, and permit applicants and permit transfer applicants in the solid waste program. Well, we got 3 out of the 4 right. And on the 4th one, which relates to applications for solid waste permits, the language just simply was a drafting error where 3 lines of text got misplaced in the paragraph. And if I would direct your attention to the bill, it seeks to amend RSA 149 M11 Roman 3A. And you'll note that on lines 6 through 8, there are a series of words there that would be deleted and then replaced in whole lower down in the paragraph at lines 11 through 13. And the reason is that there's 2 things happening there. In that paragraph, in the first part of the paragraph, it directs the department to conduct a performance history review of in the way it's supposed to read and has read for years and reads in the other parts of the relevant statutes for the applicant and its officers and directors. And that really ends up being a very thorough review and an evaluation of the facility's history, the applicant's history, and its officers and directors. But then it goes further to say that after that history review is conducted, the agency has the authority to ask the Attorney General to conduct criminal records checks of a larger group of folks. So that would include the officers and directors and the facility itself, but also partners and individuals or entities that have managerial, supervisory, or substantial decision-making authority and responsibility for the management and operations of the facility. And so the idea is that you might have someone who's not an officer or director, but who's going to be the manager of the facility, who's going to have a really direct ability to influence whether that facility is operated lawfully and in compliance. And what the statute is intended to do is to give the authority of the agency to ask for a criminal records check for that individual. But because of the drafting error that occurred in 2011, we would not be able to do that. If this bill were not to pass, the only folks who would be subject to a criminal records check would be the officers and directors of the applicant. And so this is just really aligning it with the way it's been done and the way it should be done, and the way it's been done for years. And so, again, that's the reason why DES requested, once we discovered this error, which we only discovered after the bill had been signed into law, Senator Pearl was gracious enough to be willing to sponsor a bill to make a correction to this drafting error. And so with that, obviously DES supports the bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Director. Senator Waters has a question.
Yes, thanks. And Phil, do you have copies of the letter we received from Adam Finkel for the committee? Okay, I'm going to hand this to you. You know Mr. Finkel.
I do.
Yeah, anyway, so that's the preface to asking these questions, which I will just ask you.
Okay, sure.
You take a look at
Thank you. All right.
So we received this, I don't know, maybe last night, anyways, from Mr. Finkel, who's an expert on this, have been wanting to testify down here, and basically a renowned expert on these matters, researcher, that he's concerned about not so much the shifting of the language from one place to the other, that technical correction, but it seems to make the background check optional or at the discretion of DES to request of partners, and his, anxieties about the industry and potential bad actors. And so the question, if the committee had a chance to look at it, is that why is DES moving to what appears to be discretion rather than required in that one? So I don't know if you have any thoughts about it.
Sure. Yeah. So, well, I think I've just read his comments just now, but I think if I'm reading it correctly, I think it reflects a misunderstanding of what was really going on in the law. I mean, he refers to a newly enacted clause, but in fact, that newly enacted clause was enacted in error. It was simply a drafting error. And when the legislature was looking at that language, they were looking at 4 different sections, 3 of which were entirely correct and consistent with one another, and then a 4th one that was simply wrong. But I will tell you that the issue of the law has always provided and made it optional for the agency to request a criminal background check. I will tell you that in my tenure, which goes 16 years in this position, we have always requested criminal background checks on that larger list of parties that are outlined in the statute. We do that because we know that it's something the legislature wanted the agency to have the authority to do. There was a concern that these facilities, whether a hazardous waste or solid waste facility, have the potential to have an adverse impact on the environment or on communities, and they wanted to make sure that the people operating them and running them were capable and proficient and law-abiding parties. So we do routinely ask that these parties submit information, and they have to submit a form that gives permission for their criminal background records check to be conducted. And so that's always done. To say that somehow we took something that was required and now we're trying to make it optional, that's not accurate. The law has always said that it used the word may, that the agency may request these background checks. with respect to his reference to the sort of automatic submission of performance history information, that is something that is required. That's not, we are to get that from them. That's part of every application for a solid or hazardous waste facility permit. And it's really intended to look at the applicant, which is really a broad term. So, you know, when the applicant comes in, you're looking for a performance history. It's a company, it's a facility in some cases if they're looking for a permit transfer. And we're looking at all of the information available about the performance history of that applicant. So I think that I understand the potential concern here, but I think it reflects a misunderstanding of why we're here with this bill in the first place. This was nobody sitting down saying, oh, we don't like the change we made last year. We sat down and said, we made the wrong change last year. It was an error. It was simply a drafting error. And it's not, interestingly enough, on the history, the error occurred midway through the process. When we first introduced the bill, we worked out a lot of concerns that commenters had. There were some concerns about the technical practicability of implementing certain provisions. And we worked on those. And when we worked on those and made the changes and requested OLS, the draft that came back made an error. And I'll own it because I reviewed it and I said, yep, that's right. And it wasn't, there was an error there that I didn't catch. So as a result, we're just looking to fix that error.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mike. I just think it's important that the hearing records show that the question was asked and answered, and I appreciate it. And I'll take that back.
Oh, sure.
Senator Bertzel?
If you want a copy of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike, the only question I have basically is, has it always been standard practice to have the Attorney General do the background check, and why?
That's what the statute has always required. The idea being that I think that a law enforcement authority should be conducting that. We don't, no one at DES has access to criminal records databases. So, and even that, with the AG, even with their authority, they still need to be backed by the proper statutory language in order to request New Hampshire State Police to conduct that investigation. My understanding is that the pathway here is that the FBI, probably for very good reason, is persnickety about whether your statutory language really gives you the authority to access their database. So before they will conduct a federal criminal background investigation, or records check, they want to know that your statutory language really gives you the authority to do that.
Oh, sure.
So the reason why the Attorney General is able to do it is because they do access the FBI database. A lot of the other companies outside, they don't have the capability of the commercial companies that do background checks.
I am certainly aware that there are a lot of professions, a lot of jobs, categories that require criminal background checks. And those are, as I understand it, the AG's not, you're right, the AG's not in that process. The individual who needs to submit to a criminal background check fills out a form and goes directly to state police, and then they provide that. But even in those cases, my understanding would be that the state police have determined that for that particular profession or job, there's appropriate statutory language that gives authority for them to access the database and do the check.
My only question is I want you to spell persnickety. I think you win the word of the day with that one. Senator Altshuler.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. I hear you saying that this is a drafting error, and if it is and you want to fall on your sword, good, it's all you. However, there is some question as to whether that is, that is actually what happened, and I have received a number of communications from within my district about this particular piece of legislation. So I haven't heard the answer, and I think I've heard the question a couple of times, but what would be if those words on line 9, whenever requested by the department, were removed? And, it would just the application information shall include. And what would be the problem in just requiring the background check for all parties that are associated?
I don't know that there would be a particular problem with that. I guess if I were to think of an example of when it might not be we administer a permit process and a permit program that, particularly in the solid waste program, that includes a facility that's operating ends up making many applications for, whether it's for expansion or whether it's for, construction approval or what have you. It's certainly possible we could maybe have just gone through the whole review process, and then a month later we get a new application from the same applicant with all the same parties that that would also give us the authority to ask for a records check. And if it was 2 weeks earlier, we might decide, well, we don't really need to conduct that. So that's the only example I can think of. But I can't.
So-
I haven't.
So the objection is not having to do the process, it's having to do the process within a smaller scope of time, which you're deeming to be moderately unnecessary if it is within a couple of weeks or a month. Is that what I'm ascertaining?
I'm giving that as an example to,
Okay.
I guess, I don't know, I haven't talked to
permit
leadership.
applications,
This
I
issue
don't.
issue about changing it from
Yeah.
may to shall, is something that's I've not reviewed or thought about, to be honest with you, and it's not been vetted through leadership, so I'm not prepared to tell you, yes, we would support that or we wouldn't, we'd have to look at it. But again, it would, keep in mind that it would apply to 4 different types of permits. It would be for the hazardous and solid waste permits and hazardous and solid waste permit transfers.
Right.
So current language right now, sorry,
Please.
you all set?
Nope,
So
I'll
current
let
language right
another
now
one.
on line 9, whenever requested by the department, that has been current language, and that's been the
That's
protocol?
been time immemorial, right? It goes back decades.
Okay, so just wanted to make sure I was understanding.
That's correct.
Further questions from the committee?
Yep, one follow-up. So, since this is requested by the department, you have showed this act shall take effect 60 days after passage. So what happens to permits that are actively in flux, that are, still in the review stage at that 60 days? Does this now, do we not have to do all of the background checks?
Well, we'd have to look at the individual circumstance, so I won't comment on any individual circumstance. But my concern if the bill does not pass is that for any applications that we receive for which we request criminal records checks, we would only be able to request criminal background checks for officers and directors. We would not be able to request them for those other parties, which we believe are important parties to evaluate as part of our process.
I'm sorry, may I follow up on?
One more, sure.
So you said if this doesn't pass, if I understood what you just said, if this doesn't pass, then you would not be able to follow up on conducting those background checks on managerial, supervisory, or substantial decision-making members? But that's actually, I don't understand I don't understand the statement you just made. That if this doesn't pass and stays the way it is.
If you read the statute as it
Yep.
reads right now, from
Yes.
line 9 to 14,
Yes,
it simply reads that we can request a criminal record of the applicant and its officers and directors, period. So officers and directors, we could request a criminal record check for. We could not, unless this bill passes and adds those 3 lines there, we could not request criminal background checks for partners and individuals having managerial, supervisory, and substantial decision-making authority and responsibility for management of operations or activities for which the permit's being
those are
sought.
lines 6, 7, and 8.
No, see, that's what's deleted in the bill. I'm reading down on lines 11, 12, and 13.
I see that, but if you don't move that,
Then all we'll be able to do is expect to have a performance history on those individuals, which would be submitted by the applicant with no corresponding confirmation of its veracity that you get with a records check. So in other words, if the language as it exists in the statute right now, as it was amended by Senate Bill 211 were to pass, then the performance history that is submitted by the applicant
Yes.
would be expected to include, and in fact, it kind of does anyways already, because they tell us about their operation, their people, and their facilities. But that's all we would get. We would not be able to then ask for a criminal background records check on those individuals. And that's what I'm concerned about. I think that is important to conduct as part of any hazardous to solid waste permit evaluation, which is why I requested it in every instance during my tenure. But without this change, I would be unable to do that.
Are you clear on it now?
Yeah, may I ask one more question?
more
So,
question,
so to satisfy that need, would you support putting the first part of line 10, conduct a background check investigation of the performance history, at the end of line 9, and just then whenever they're requested by the department, you don't have to request by the department. The department doesn't need to request, because it will just be matter of course. Because it sounds like that's the missing piece, is that you want that extra information, but the concern is that you don't always ask for the information. Like that, as a policy, it's not necessarily mandatory, and this would put that in a mandatory space. Is that?
I understand
does that
the
make
question, but again, it's not
the-
something I've vetted through leadership of the agency, so
Okay.
I can't say what our position would be on that.
Okay.
I will tell you that it has always been my practice to request those background checks, and will continue to be throughout my work in the agency.
Sure, I understood, and, we're looking to go, that
Sure.
your policy and practice, we want the next person who does this to have that as a guideline as well. So, thank you.
Senator Bursi? So I guess along that same vein, I will ask one more, because prior to your tenure, was that also always the policy of the previous director?
That is my understanding, is that it has been routinely done throughout the history of the permitting program. But I cannot speak with authority on what happened prior to my tenure, because
Right.
it's just what I understand has happened.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you. I have no one else signed up to speak. Is there anyone else that would like to? We're down to only you. You're the last one in the audience. All right, seeing no one else, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 329. Senator Avard has asked that we not exec any bills today, but he has informed me that next Tuesday we will only be executing bills, and we have no hearings, so I would say we should all be prepared to be ready to do that.
Here next week. So Tuesday is just
Okay.
exec.
That's my understanding from what the chair gave to me earlier.
Hearings to put executive.
So with that, our work here is done for today, and we will adjourn. Thank you all.